Let's begin with the most enigmatic and grand mystifier of the 18th century, the Count of Saint-Germain. He was a man without age, without a homeland, and without a past. Shrouded in mystery, he moved freely through European courts, presenting himself as an alchemist, musician, philosopher, and confidant of monarchs. His true origin, an absolute enigma, only fueled the legends surrounding him. This phenomenal adventurer achieved the impossible. He convinced the most influential people in Europe, from Louis XV to Catherine the Great, of his ability to work miracles. He demonstrated enlarged diamonds, removed defects from stones, and claimed to possess the secrets of eternal youth and the philosopher's stone. He asserted that he had lived for hundreds of years, conversed with Jesus Christ, and knew all the world's languages. Saint-Germain engaged in diplomatic intrigues and acted as a secret agent. His virtuoso violin playing and profound knowledge in arts and sciences only added to his aura of genius. As a result, Saint-Germain became a living legend, the man of mystery, the immortal Count, the Wizard of Europe. Stories about him were passed down by word of mouth, accumulating new details and transforming him into a figure standing above time. He was the embodiment of the occult hopes of the Enlightenment era. So, what became of this mythical figure? Officially, he died in 1784 in Germany. However, his death only sparked a new wave of rumors. He was seen after his demise in Paris, London, and Russia. The legend of the immortal Count, who simply vanished to reappear, became indelible. But let's set aside the mystical trappings. The Count of Saint-Germain was not an immortal magician or an extraterrestrial being. He was a master swindler, a brilliant actor and psychologist who skillfully exploited humanity's desire for miracles and the ignorance and superstitions prevalent among the 18th century elite. His magic was the art of illusion, and his immortality merely the product of a meticulously constructed, incredibly audacious and grand deception. Beyond the dazzling facade Saint-Germain presented to the European elite lay a personality whose origin still remains one of history's most intricate mysteries. This veil of the unknown, carefully maintained and amplified by him, served as the first and most potent instrument of his influence. In the 18th century world, where lineage determined absolutely everything, from one's place at the table to political weight, a man without a past could be anyone. He could be an illegitimate offspring of a king, a lost heir to an ancient lineage, or even an envoy from distant unknown lands. This fundamental uncertainty allowed him to adopt any mask his inventive mind desired. Rumors of his birth multiplied, overlapping each other, creating an impenetrable smokescreen. Some claimed he was the illegitimate son of Transylvanian Prince Rákóczi II. Others named him the heir of a Portuguese Jewish alchemist, while still others attributed divine or extraterrestrial origins to him. It mattered little which of these versions, if any, approached reality. What mattered was that none could be confirmed or refuted. This vacuum of identity, which deprived him of conventional anchors, simultaneously granted him absolute freedom, the freedom to reinvent himself, to fully control his image and his biography. And he, by all accounts, seized this unique opportunity with a desperate, almost predatory grip. Imagine a young man whose childhood and youth were shrouded in an impenetrable veil. Perhaps he grew up in poverty or was forced to conceal his true origin, constantly enduring the hardships of an uncertain social status. This early uncertainty, the constant balancing act, could very well have been the fundamental psychological trauma that shaped his unique, adaptive character. The continuous need to pretend, to adjust, to be someone else in order to survive or succeed, gradually transformed into a virtuosic art. He learned to observe, imitate, read people, and anticipate their desires and fears with incredible precision. Each new role, each successful deception, likely provided him not only material gains, but also a profound, albeit distorted, sense of control over his own destiny and the fates of those he manipulated. It was in these early unknown experiments, in a series of minor hoaxes and successful pretenses, that his genius for disguise was forged. Perhaps he started small, posing as a noble traveler, an art connoisseur, or an influential secret agent, honing his skills of persuasion and intrigue on less sophisticated audiences. Each time he succeeded in deceiving someone, he received confirmation of his exceptionalism, his ability to manipulate reality and perception. This series of escalating successes, however small, gradually propelled him towards bolder, more ambitious undertakings. And at some point, likely, came the point of no return. The moment he realized that being himself, whoever he truly was less profitable and far less interesting than being Count Saint-Germain. This role, once adopted, became his sole reality. He didn't merely play a character, he became him, dissolving into his own invention, making it his inevitable destiny. His chosen persona perfectly suited an era that was itself a grand mystification. The 18th century, at first glance, shone with the lights of the Enlightenment, proclaiming the triumph of reason, science, and logic. Yet, beneath this thin veneer of gold lay a world teeming with passions, superstitions, and an unending thirst for the miraculous. It was a time of stark contrasts, where materialist philosophers and Kabbalist mystics might dance at the same ball, and in an adjacent salon, the latest scientific discoveries were discussed alongside coffee-ground readings. European courts, centers of power and culture, were a tangled web of intrigues, where every monarch and minister sought to outmaneuver rivals and gain a secret advantage. Wars gave way to fragile peace, alliances were constantly redrawn, and entire continents hung in the balance. In this atmosphere of perpetual tension, suspicion, and power struggles, anyone claiming unique knowledge, access to hidden forces, or secret channels of information immediately became an object of intense scrutiny. Monarchs, desperately seeking ways to consolidate their power and prestige, were willing to believe the most incredible promises, if only to gain some leverage in the Game of Thrones. The economic landscape mirrored the political drama. An era of active colonization and burgeoning trade brought unprecedented wealth, but also created immense social stratification. The aristocracy, steeped in luxury, simultaneously suffered from boredom and satiety. Gold and jewels were symbols of status, and the desire to multiply them, often without significant effort, was ubiquitous. Stories of the philosopher's stone, capable of transmuting base metals into gold, or the elixir of eternal youth, were not mere fairy tales for the common folk. They were deeply embedded in the minds of even the most educated individuals, offering an easy path to boundless power, wealth, and immortality, to what sometimes seemed unattainable through ordinary means. Financial ventures, rampant speculation, and the dramatic rise and fall of fortunes created fertile ground for those who promised swift and supernatural solutions to earthly problems. And, of course, there was the prevailing social atmosphere. Despite grand pronouncements about the dawn of an age of reason, people remained human. Fear of the unknown, illness, sudden death, and the inability to explain many natural phenomena fueled a belief in miracles. Secret societies, Masonic lodges, Rosicrucians, Illuminati, proliferated, offering their members exclusive knowledge, mystical rituals, and a sense of belonging to an elite possessing hidden truths. It was in these circles where the line between science and occultism was blurred, where alchemy could coexist with chemistry and astrology with astronomy, that the most receptive audiences for such geniuses were found. The boredom of high society, craving thrills, novel experiences, and exotic curiosities, transformed any unusual character into a salon sensation. and the absence of immediate mass media and easy fact-checking allowed rumors, once set in motion, to balloon into a pan-European legend. In this whirlpool of ambition, superstition, and a thirst for the extraordinary, a figure like Saint-Germain was not just possible, he became almost inevitable. Emerging from this identity vacuum, this meticulously crafted veil of the unknown, Saint-Germain stepped onto the European stage not as an ordinary man, but as a phenomenon, a messenger from other worlds or eras. His appearance in Paris in 1745 was not merely a debut, but the first act of a grand spectacle. He didn't just speak of his abilities, he demonstrated them, and did so with such conviction that even the most enlightened minds were tempted to believe. One of his most effective and profitable fabrications was the purification and enlargement of precious stones. Imagine an aristocrat brings Saint-Germain a dull diamond with internal flaws, and a few days later receives it back, shining, flawless, and sometimes appearing larger. Saint-Germain claimed to possess the secret of melting stones and recreating them in a more perfect form. For a demonstration, he might take several small diamonds and claim to have fused them into one large, flawless stone. The secret was simple: sleight of hand, skill in swapping stones, and possibly the use of existing, higher-quality counterparts he had acquired or received from accomplices. He understood perfectly that in a world where jewels were status symbols and their multiplication a cherished dream, such a talent would be worth its weight in gold. He didn't merely promise, he seemed to provide tangible proof of his supernatural abilities, reinforcing his fabulous tales of centuries-old life and ancient knowledge. The next step in his alchemical career was the promise to transform base metals into gold. While there is no direct evidence of Saint-Germain mass-producing gold, he masterfully maintained this illusion. He might arrange small demonstrations where, for example, before an astonished audience, an ordinary copper object would acquire a golden hue after treatment. Most likely he used alloys with a high gold or mercury content that could imitate the transmutation process. These tricks, combined with his erudition and mysterious aura, convinced many that he was on the verge of the greatest discovery. He never provided precise instructions or recipes, always maintaining an air of inaccessibility and exclusivity regarding his knowledge. His goal was not to make anyone rich, but to sustain interest and belief in his exceptionalism, which allowed him to retain access to the highest circles and receive generous gifts for promises that were never fully delivered. The pinnacle of his mystifications was his claim to possess the elixir of eternal youth and even immortality. Saint-Germain never appeared to age, at least outwardly, thanks to meticulous self-care, skillful makeup, and perhaps a specific diet. He recounted stories as if he had personally witnessed events that occurred hundreds of years ago, describing them with astonishing accuracy and details that only an eyewitness could know. He hinted that he had met historical figures, including Jesus Christ, and spoke all known languages fluently, which was unthinkable for an ordinary person. These claims were not mere boasting, they were the bedrock of his image as a man beyond time, one who had grasped the mysteries of existence. He did not directly sell this elixir, but its very existence, supposedly confirmed by his own appearance and narratives, made him an invaluable advisor and object of veneration for those who feared death and old age. He offered not just wealth, but something far greater, the hope of transcending human nature itself. Every such demonstration, every such story, reinforced his status not merely as an adventurer, but as a true magician capable of manipulating reality itself. He didn't just deceive, he created a new, parallel reality in which his words became truth, and his tricks, proofs of miracles. His mastery lay in not just selling illusions, but selling himself as the embodiment of these illusions, as living proof that the impossible was possible. How did he, an ordinary man, manage to become the living embodiment of the impossible? The secret lay not in magic, but in a profound understanding of human psychology and a masterful command of influence. Saint-Germain didn't merely perform, he orchestrated the perceptions of those around him, transforming every appearance into a meticulously planned spectacle. His principal weapon was an extraordinary charisma, honed over years. He was impeccable in his manners, his speech mesmerizing, and his gaze seemed to penetrate the deepest recesses of the soul. He didn't just speak multiple languages, he had mastered them, switching seamlessly without the slightest accent, adapting to his interlocutor, whether a French philosopher or a Russian diplomat. His encyclopedic knowledge of art, music, sciences, and history, whether genuine or feigned, astonished. He could discourse for hours on the intricacies of ancient manuscripts, play the violin with a virtuosity surpassing many professionals, or discuss the latest scientific discoveries. All of this created an image not merely of an educated man, but a true genius whose abilities transcended the mundane. Yet he always maintained a certain distance, an aura of understatement, which only enhanced his allure. He never revealed all his cards, leaving listeners captive to speculation and conjecture, which was far more effective than any direct statements. Saint-Germain masterfully played on the most powerful human weaknesses: greed, vanity, fear of death, and boredom. He understood perfectly that aristocrats, steeped in luxury, were sated and yearned for thrills and new wonders. He didn't sell elixirs or secrets directly, he hinted, demonstrated, and allowed belief to take root. When he improved diamonds, he didn't just perform a trick, he provided tangible proof that dreams of easy enrichment and control over matter could become reality. When he spoke of his centuries-old past, he offered not just a story, but the hope of immortality, of overcoming humanity's most dreaded fate, the finitude of existence. These promises, though often unspoken, were far more potent than any contracts. His influence techniques were subtle and multifaceted. He did not loudly proclaim himself, but preferred others to do so. Saint-Germain carefully chose his experts, influential aristocrats, monarchs, and scholars, who, charmed by his personality and talents, became his unwitting advertisers. Just one or two convinced supporters in high society were enough for rumors of the wizard to spread across all European courts. He masterfully created a buzz, employing the effect of scarcity and exclusivity. He might suddenly vanish from one city, only to reappear in another, leaving a trail of bewilderment and heightened interest. His secrets were accessible only to the select few, which further fueled curiosity and the desire to be admitted into his circle. He did not pursue everyone, he chose those who could bring him maximum benefit, be it money, political influence, or simply the propagation of his legend. Perhaps Saint-Germain's most remarkable trait was his incredible personal adaptability. He was a chameleon, capable of instantly changing his mask depending on the audience and circumstances. In a philosopher's salon, he could be a profound thinker; among alchemists, a knowledgeable mystic; at a monarch's court, a subtle diplomat and secret agent. He read people like an open book, discerning their hidden desires, fears, and ambitions, and offered precisely what they wanted to hear or see. This ability for instantaneous adjustment, for improvisation on the fly, allowed him not only to avoid exposure, but also to constantly augment his legend. He was not confined to a single role. He was a master of all roles, always ready for the next act in the grand spectacle of his life. His success was a direct consequence not of supernatural abilities, but of an unparalleled talent for psychological manipulation and social engineering, honed to perfection. His unparalleled talent for manipulation found fertile ground at the most influential courts of Europe. King Louis XIV of France, sated with the mundane and constantly seeking new pleasures and secret knowledge, became one of Saint-Germain's primary patrons. The monarch, himself interested in alchemy and occultism, saw in the Count not merely a court eccentric, but a potential possessor of secrets capable of bringing him immense wealth and strengthening his power. Saint-Germain masterfully played on this desire, offering the king not only promises of transmuting metals into gold, but also more subtle, intriguing services. He acted as a trusted advisor on diplomatic matters, conveying, as he claimed, valuable information obtained from his extensive and mysterious sources. These sources were, of course, his own invention, but their appeal to a monarch craving advantages over rivals was undeniable. Queen Marie Leschinska, Louis XV's wife, also fell under the charm of the immortal Count. She valued him as a musician and conversationalist, admiring his knowledge of art. Saint-Germain often frequented her salons, where he showcased his musical talents, playing the violin and harpsichord with extraordinary virtuosity, and entertained listeners with tales of his world travels and conversations with historical figures. These performances seemed to confirm his incredible claims of age and experience, solidifying his reputation in high society. He was not merely present at court, he became an integral part of it, admitted into the most intimate circles. Thanks to royal patronage, Saint-Germain received not only generous monetary rewards and gifts, but also unspoken immunity, allowing him to move and act freely without fear of serious scrutiny. His influence extended to other European monarchs, Frederick the Great of Prussia, Catherine the Great of Russia. All were intrigued by his figure and sought contact with him, hoping to benefit from his supposed knowledge. He skillfully used these connections, creating the illusion of a global network of influence in which he was the central figure. Every new monarch, every noble aristocrat who succumbed to his charm became a new link in this chain, confirming his exceptionalism and multiplying his legend. However, not everyone succumbed to his charm. In a world where intrigues and adventures thrived, there were always skeptics and rivals. One of Saint-Germain's most famous and acerbic critics was the renowned Italian adventurer Giacomo Casanova. Their paths crossed in Holland, where Casanova, himself a master of deception and manipulation, could not help but recognize in Saint-Germain a kind of colleague, yet felt deep distrust and antipathy towards him. Casanova, in his memoirs, left a vivid and highly unflattering description of the Count, calling him the greatest and most impudent charlatan he had ever met. The conflict between them was inevitable. Casanova, driven not only by professional jealousy, but perhaps also by a genuine desire to expose the swindler, attempted to expose Saint-Germain. He described how Saint-Germain showed him a supposedly enlarged diamond, and Casanova, being an attentive observer and connoisseur of human nature, immediately doubted the authenticity of the miracle. He asked sharp questions, tried to catch the Count in a lie, analyzing his words and actions with cynical insight. For Casanova, who himself made a living through cunning and charm, Saint-Germain was a challenge, a mirror in which he saw an amplified and bolder version of himself. Saint-Germain, in turn, displayed astonishing composure and masterful evasion. He never engaged in direct arguments, nor accepted challenges to public exposure. Instead, he employed his favorite tactic: vague hints, evasive answers, instant topic changes, and sometimes complete disregard for inconvenient questions. He preferred to surround himself with those who were willing to believe, not doubt. For him, Casanova was less a threat than an annoying obstacle that could simply be bypassed. The Count understood perfectly that to maintain his grand mystification, it was far more important to preserve the faith of influential patrons than to convince a single skeptic. This confrontation between belief and skepticism, between a carefully constructed illusion and an attempt to dismantle it, was a key element in Saint-Germain's career. Each time he managed to outmaneuver or ignore his critics, his legend only grew stronger. For even a failure to expose him was perceived by supporters as further proof of his supernatural abilities. Saint-Germain didn't just deceive, he involved his patrons in a grand game, where they themselves became co-authors of his myth, investing their hopes, ambitions, and, of course, money into it. His success was built not only on his personal talents, but also on the willingness of the 18th century elite to be deceived, on their desperate thirst for miracles in a world that, despite the Enlightenment, remained full of mysteries and fears. He gave them what they wanted, not just a promise, but a feeling of touching the impossible, and for that they were willing to pay any